gentlemen of the media. Welcome to the post-cabinet press briefing for today, Wednesday, September 23rd, 2015. First, before I get started, allow me, on behalf of His Excellency the President and the members of Cabinet and the government, to take this opportunity to extend Eid Mubarak greetings to the Muslim community on the occasion of Eid al-Adha, which will be celebrated tomorrow, Thursday, September 24th, 2015. Cabinet yesterday was briefed on a number of matters and made a number of decisions, gave its no objection to several items of expenditure which were brought before it. As you're aware, last week I did indicate that the President would be leaving with a delegation to attend the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which starts tomorrow. The President is due to leave this afternoon with this delegation so that Guyana's interests can be represented at that highest decision-making forum. Cabinet was briefed by the Minister of Governance on an engagement which took place last week with the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association and several companies that came from Trinidad on an event organized under the theme Economic Opportunities and Threats to expediting oil and gas in a new green carbon environment. This push for the development of oil and gas in this country, as you know, became much more intensified after the results were announced of a major oil find by ExxonMobil. Ever since then, we've had what is called downstream and upstream oil interests that have actually come to Guyana to look at how the sector will be developed. So during the last week, Cabinet was briefed by the Minister of Governance that there were at least 16 companies from Trinidad and Tobago that came here to interact with the local manufacturing and service sector. And they were basically looking at issues of how these oil and gas matters were to be dealt with, and the fact that you do not wait until you start producing before you actually prepare for that stage. So there's a lot of preparatory work that's going on with these companies, and it is in fact generating a great deal of excitement in the business sector. There was, of course, a very sobering presentation made to that forum by Dr. Roger Hussein, a lecturer and researcher on energy trade at the University of the West Indies. I think the key point of that presentation was that the finding of oil and the development of oil and natural gas can in fact have, even though it will have a good effect, it can also have some bad effects on production and manufacturing. And I think what he did in fact was to caution that you be very careful with the proceeds in the industry. Of course, the fact that we had already indicated that it is the intention of the government to establish a sovereign wealth fund was something that actually resonated very well with that presentation. And during the course of the week, the Honorable Minister of Governance did meet with some representatives from the Commonwealth Secretariat, some experts from that institution, to look at how you develop further this concept of a sovereign wealth fund. Cabinet was also briefed on a military buildup by the Venezuelans on the border between Guyana and Venezuela. A little bit more of that you will get when the Chief of Staff makes a brief statement on the matter and will indicate to you what has been our response, the nation's response to this. But it is important to note that His Excellency the President is very much on top of this situation, that only about 20 minutes ago he was in a meeting with the Chief of Staff and myself. I acted in that capacity as the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff as the Chief of Staff of the forces. And of course, the President is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Guyana. And so it is a matter which is of tremendous concern to the President, and he has given some clear directions as to what our response will be. Clearly, he recognizes that there are political considerations and there are strategic considerations for this buildup of troops on our border. And it is a matter which, of course, will be aired at every fora where Guyana is represented. And more importantly, it will be the subject of part of the President's presentation at the United Nations when he goes up there. Cabinet was also given a brief on the operation of the river taxi in Berbice by the Honorable Minister of Public Infrastructure. As I did indicate to the press conference last that we were going to start this service on Monday, so that the children and the elderly who were required to cross the Berbice River were not going to be affected by the refusal of the Berbice Bridge Company, Inc. to lower the fares, the toll for crossing that bridge, as was mandated by the government. We have advised that the boats are working very well, that the persons on the east and the west bank of the Berbice River are very happy about the service, that there are at least 16 trips per day that these boats are making. They commence work at 6 a.m. and they stop at 6 p.m. and that the arrangements are well in place. This, as you know, was going to be a 1-month exercise in the first instance, but I believe that based on this kind of response that we are getting, that this might very well go beyond that and beyond that and beyond that. Cabinet gave its no objection to certain contracts, and in the discussion preceding the granting of its no objection, Cabinet had some very firm words to say to the manner in which the contracts were executed under the previous administration, and the fact that contract sums were being extended beyond a sum that was actually catered for in the award of the contract. But it would appear to Cabinet that some of these contracts which were coming before it had been deliberately underbidded, if there's such a word. People were bidding low and knowing fully well that they will come later on for variations. So that in a process like that, tenderers who were bona fides, who could have done the work, they were actually cheated out of the contracts because some persons deliberately bidded low and the contracts were awarded to the lowest bidder, knowing fully well that they will come back for variations which eventually took the contract sum beyond what was the engineer's estimate. This was the situation which confronted Cabinet when we looked at the award for an extension for a consultancy service for the Cato Primary School. This is a primary school that I think it started at about $500 million and it's almost $1 billion now. And it's still not finished. And so the company that is the sort of supervising the work of that contract, they've actually now come back to Cabinet to ask for an extension, which will cost another $4.2 million on the construction services that are being provided. These are the people who are actually overseeing the contract, not the actual work that is going on. So what you're finding here now is that you're probably having a consultancy service that is approving extensions after extensions on the original contract. And so they themselves have now come to Cabinet to ask for an extension of their own contract. Cabinet gave some very clear directions to the Minister of Education, under whose watch, under whose ministry this matter falls, that he is to call in the contracting service and have some very firm words with them to the effect that we are not going to tolerate any further extensions, because it's basically becoming a travesty, the way in which these matters are being dealt with. Cabinet also gave its objection to the award of contracts for printing of nursery level books to the Ministry of Education. These contracts were awarded to a one print shop in the sum of $4.4 million, Office Authority in the sum of $31.477 million, NEAF Printery in the sum of $26,801, and F&H Printers. These are contracts for the preparation and supply of textbooks and IRI books. Cabinet also approved of the attendance of 2 delegates from the Department of Natural Resources and the Energy Natural Resources to attend a 2015 workshop on the Green Climate Fund to be held in Belize City from October 6th to the 8th, 2015. As you're aware, we are in the preliminary stages of consultations on what will be known as COP21, which is a climate fund arrangement and conference that will take place in Paris. And there are preliminary consultations which are taking place in that regard, consultations with the indigenous peoples, consultations with other stakeholders in the climate change sector. And this conference in Belize is part of Guyana's preparation for the COP21 conference in Paris. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, those will be the matters which I would wish to advert to at this point in time. What I'll do, I'll ask the Honorable Chief of Staff to give you a brief statement, after which we will take questions from you.
Thank you, Minister Harmon and Mr. Mark Archer, members of the media, and I acknowledge the presence of Minister Trotman. It's indeed an opportunity to address you on the important issue as it pertains to the Guyana-Venezuela border. And I wish to start by saying that the GDF remains ready to define aggression on our border with Venezuela. We have troops deployed at various locations, and the important ones in this sense are location Itrimbang, location Kaikan, and we have several observation posts along the Cayuni River, and we continue to monitor the activities by the Venezuelan armed forces on our frontiers. We were alerted to the buildup of troops that commenced over 1 week ago, but with a noticeable and unusual deployment over the last weekend of not only military troops, over 200 troops were deployed, as you know, between San Martin, the small town on the border, and Coco Island. And there were, as you would also know, photographs of surface-to-air missiles that were seen at locations within the Venezuelan border, but contiguous to the Guyana-Venezuela border area, in the sense that we were able to locate the missiles at a town named El Dorado, which is about 57 kilometers inside of Venezuela. However, what is unusual is the deployment of military boats with machine guns in the Cayuni River. And I wish to state that the Cayuni River is inclusive of Guyana's border. To deploy armed boats in the Cayuni River is an affront to our sovereignty. And this was reported to our Commander-in-Chief, as you heard earlier from Minister Harmon, and the necessary press releases were made, and the international agencies of concern were alerted. The deployment remains, as I speak, in position, and we continue to observe the troops, as I mentioned before, just over 200 troops at San Martin and Coco Island, and the movement of those boats between Coco Island and San Martin. As mentioned earlier, again, our deployment is geared to define aggression and acts of incursion on our border, and we remain ready to deploy additional troops and equipment, if need be, to those locations. Our troops at Base Command Stevenson to Mary, our troops at Camp Payangano, and our troops at other coastal and inland training locations were already briefed, already alerted, and remain in a state of readiness to support our activities on the border. In addition to mentioning the state of readiness, I wish to also reiterate that we have a settled border with Venezuela. And our duty is to define aggression along the settled border with Venezuela. Thank you.
To say that, having heard Brigadier's statements, that there is no cause for people to believe that we are about to be invaded or anything like that. There are obviously maneuvers, but these have more of a political end than a military end. You'll be aware that Venezuela has similar activities on the border with Colombia, and we all know that there is the UN General Assembly that is being hosted in New York later in the week. And so much of what we're seeing is expected to influence and to impact and to make an impact on the world stage. So Guyanese ought not to be alarmed that anything is about to happen, but as the Brigadier has pointed out, all precautions are in place and everything is being done to monitor and to define what is going on. And in no way is Guyana preparing to stage on its own any act or to precipitate any act of aggression. So we are in the throes of some grandstanding, so to speak, but that's not to say that we should ignore it and we should not pay careful attention. But one only has to see what is happening on the other border with Colombia to know that it's Guyana's turn to experience some of the same. But we shouldn't panic or go into or have a sense that we're about to be faced with guns and missiles or anything of the sort.
World MRR waves to either of the ministers or the chief of staff. As Guyana been informing, say, the United Nations, CARICOM, UNISUR, and also has there been any formal contact with Venezuela, any protest note dispatched to them with respect to these latest developments?
Yes, we have activated all of the mechanisms that are available to us. Those are at the United Nations, the CARICOM Secretariat, CARICOM generally, the Organization of American States, and UNISUR. And it is our intention to explore these possibilities to its fullest so that our diplomatic initiative is really where the efforts will be. As the Chief of Staff indicated to you, the role of the Guyana Defence Force is to define aggression. And so once we define that aggression, that information passes up the channel to our diplomatic representatives who actually takes it to the next level. I am aware that there has been some contact with, in fact, Venezuela. In these days, I think you need not even send a diplomatic note. From the time the president spoke, I think there was a response from General Lopez, who is the Minister of Defense, that said that these were normal operations being conducted in Venezuela. Well, they are in fact operations conducted in Venezuela. That is a fact. But it is the intensity of it and the nearness to our borders and the quality of armament and military material that are being used in these exercises. As an old saying, if you see a neighbor playing with match, don't wait to get the water. You got to make sure you're on standby with your water. So you don't wait until something happens and then we're going to say, oh gosh, better we tell the people. It is our responsibility as a government to ensure that the nation is informed and advised on these matters, because it doesn't matter if you choose not to say it. Somebody will be with a camera there, and it's on Facebook, it's on WhatsApp, and they are actually seeing it. So these are not the days when a government can decide that it is keeping information from its citizenry. Our responsibility is to ensure that the information is properly analyzed and that we provide guidance and careful instructions to the disciplined forces, to the army and the police who also are deployed there, and as well as ensuring that our people are informed at every stage. We believe that this is our best form of defense. Once our people are mobilized, they are told what is happening, we believe that Guyanese people are astute enough to understand the situation and make the right decisions. And so this is what has informed our decisions to ensure that this information goes out there to the public, and so the public understands the reason why we make the decisions that we make.
A clarification, Mr. Harmon, did you formally, as government, formally written to the Venezuelan authorities expressing concern about what has happened so far? And are you considering the presence of the Venezuelan military in the Cuyuna River an incursion?
It is an act of aggression.
Not incursion.
It's an act of aggression, and it is something which I believe Minister Carl Greenidge including that in a note which has been, if it hasn't been already, it is being prepared to be sent to the Venezuelans. But certainly this is something which the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been engaged in on as late as last night.
Brazil had made a statement that now isn't the time for the kind of actions Venezuela is taking. Has there been any approach by the Brazilians since this heightened Venezuelan presence on the border? And after that, sir, perhaps you can talk to me about whether there has been any pharmaceutical contracts awarded.
To completely, meanwhile, back to matters.
Back to matters. You would recall that at I think it was the 205th an independence celebration of Brazil, that the Brazilian ambassador made some firm statements on this matter. I think the words that he used was that Brazil will not tolerate any changes on its borders. I think that's a very strong statement, and I know that Brazil they are following this matter very carefully, and I know that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs would certainly be sending out notes to the various diplomatic missions that are here, so that they are kept informed of what is happening and Guyana's posture on these matters. No, we have not. I don't think we have not at cabinet meeting yesterday. We did not consider any pharmaceutical contracts, but I don't know. You seem to have an interest in pharmaceutical contracts.
You mentioned that 1 week ago you started noticing the deployment at the border. Was it the GDF that notified government of this deployment? And Mr. Harmon, why wait for over a week or a week before the citizens are informed? Why wait until it hit social media before the citizens were informed?
Thank you, Marcel. As mentioned, we've been monitoring, and we continue to monitor the border for years now. Over a number of years, we continue to monitor the border every day. And every day we will have reports coming into Defense Headquarters. What has occurred over the weekend, what was deemed unusual. Indeed, over a week ago, we have seen changes in the deployments along the border. But what occurred over the weekend, the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, that was deemed unusual. And therefore, that's why it's being reported as being unusual. But those reports were coming in. And if you've been monitoring Facebook, and so you would have seen that the photographs pertaining to the missiles and the boats really start coming in like Sunday, Monday, and not before then.
And Brigadier, you didn't answer if it was the GDF that notified government.
Yes, the GDF, I'm not aware if governments have been notified by other sources, but indeed the GDF did notify government promptly.
I think your question is answered, Marcel, or you need anything more than that? Yes, I think so.
You said that Camp Stevenson, GDF, and Ghana all were notified. Has there been additional troops deployed to our borders?
We have alerted our troops, and they're in a state of readiness for any deployment if necessary. I wouldn't want to go into whether additional troops were deployed.
Could I just add that when there's conflict, there are three stages. There's something known as the show of force, then there's the threat of force, and then there's the use of force. What we're seeing now is just the show of force. So to start speaking about deployments and increasing troop numbers and so forth. We are still in the process of a display of the show of force. There's been no threat and certainly no use of force, but Brigadier is right, we continue to be on alert to define what is going on. So I don't think that Guyana has assumed a defensive posture because it does not anticipate that there's going to be any use of force against it, but we're in the process of defining and being able to put parameters around exactly what is happening, and has been said over the weekend and into Mondays when normal activities became unusual or abnormal, which led to a briefing yesterday, and they bring this statement to the press today.
Minister Trotman, if I can just follow up briefly, you talked about a show of force, a threat to force and so on, but why shouldn't John public consider it a threat to force if there are vessels with guns in the Guyana River, which we're saying is part of our territory?
Like militaries show force. It's what, if you look at two dogs in a yard, they raise their tails, they bare their teeth, and they show you what I can do to you. You meet two bad men at a rum shop, I can so and so to you. So we are seeing a show of force. Venezuela is well aware that the world is watching. We have, as I said, the United Nations General Assembly meets later in the week. The Pope is going to be is in the U.S. in Washington. Is going to be in Philadelphia. He's in the area, so we don't anticipate or expect anything along the lines of a use of force. So we're seeing a show. Venezuela, as you know, has always sought to move its vessels. Well, sometimes the soldiers go up the Cuyuni. They've occupied half of Ankoko for some time. But it is for the Brigadier and his officers to determine what is happening with with that display of force, and whether or not it warrants a change in Guyana's posture.
Good morning, Kian Wilbert, Kaitrue News. Just a few questions briefly. I want to take you back to the Cato school that you spoke about, sir. I want to know, given what you've seen with the Cato school, does government intend to change the manner in which it's going to award tenders or look at contracts in terms of instituting some sort of punishments for contractors when they breach the contract, or if you find that they've been involved in anti-competitive behavior? And secondly, the Auditor General for some time has not been publishing the concessions that have been granted within the year. Under this new regime, will you impress upon the AG to start respecting this new requirement, which is in our Investment Act? And thirdly, Mr. Trotman, you had said some time ago that by Shenlin and other companies in the wood processing sector, they're expected to start adding value to our woods by the end of the year or else. I want to know if you've been able to receive any update from Bai Shenlin in this regard. Have they started any work in that regard?
I'll come last. I think this is Cato.
Okay, yes. On Cato, as I indicated to you, that Cabinet had an extensive discussion on this matter, and we felt that this was a microcosm of what was happening in the wider awards of contracts and the qualification requirements for contractors. In this regard, the Minister of Public Infrastructure, along with the Minister of Business, and I think one other ministry, they have been tasked with preparing, Ministry of Finance, sorry. They have been tasked with preparing new guidelines for contractors that would basically brief contractors as to what is required of them for the award of a government contract and the penalties which they can anticipate for breaches of the award of those contracts. In the meantime, while that training process is going to take place, what we are going to be doing is to scrutinize carefully all of the existing contracts for areas of default, areas of shoddy work, and matters of that nature. The Minister of Public Infrastructure has also undertaken to provide what might be well called an inspectorate division that will inspect government-funded projects even beyond the engineering consultants that are there that are providing that service. But beyond that, just so that government can be satisfied that we are, in fact, this country is getting value for money in the award and the execution of these contracts. So it's a two-stage process. One is about training, equipping contractors with the knowledge as to what they need to do to be awarded these contracts and what are the penalties for non-performance or bad performance. And running concurrently will be the establishment of the inspectorate that will be looking at contracts that are currently in progress and to see whether, in fact, we are getting value for our money.
The other one is on the concessions.
The publishing of concessions by the Auditor General. We're bringing a fresh approach to everything, and I believe that it takes time. Everything can't be done instantly, but certainly the Auditor General is quite aware that things have changed, and we have no difficulty with transparency. The level of information provided by the Brigadier today, you would never have had under another regime, and some people will even question why give all this information. But we believe in openness, but we need your support, we need your patience. It's going to take time. But certainly, we are now for ourselves, for the first time, seeing what concessions have been given out, assessing them, and I think in due course, this is something that we'll have to make public, yes, as per law, not just because we feel we want to do it. But it will take some time. On the question of the foreign companies, again, I reiterate that we are not against foreign investment. We just want by them I mean foreign companies and persons to abide by our laws, our labor laws, laws pertaining to taxes, and we want them to respect our agreements. So we've been working with foreign companies Baishanlin, Vaitarna, and Barama to review their practices. We started to see positive signs, but I'd like to report towards the end of October where we are. I will say that in the interim, I've ordered a restriction on the export of locust logs because I felt I was told and satisfied myself that there were insufficient locust logs in Guyana, and all that had been cut, trees felled, were lined up for export, and the local market was not benefiting, so I have put a freeze on that, and we're working with Baishanlin in particular to address the situation, because while some must be exported, a quantity must remain for local furniture manufacturers and so forth. So changes have started, and the companies are willingly complying. So towards the end of October, I will make a fuller report.
Good morning, everyone. My questions are for Minister Trotman. They pertain to gold smuggling. About 2 weeks ago, you had updated us that there was supposed to be a meeting with members of the mining industry as it pertains to gold smuggling. Could you update us on that, as well as what is going on with the government's collaborative efforts with the U.S. in this regard? And thirdly, given your concerns or your knowledge that gold is being smuggled across the borders to Brazil and Suriname, are you in touch with your counterparts in those countries?
Thank you. Okay. Sounds like a university question. One of the reasons I'm late is because we've just concluded this morning at about 11 o'clock, the very meeting. It was an interagency meeting on gold smuggling in particular. We were going to issue a press release, but I think I can speak now. At that meeting were representatives of SOCU, the Special Organized Crime Unit, GRA, Guyana Gold Board, GGMC, and members of the Asset Recovery Unit of the Ministry of the Presidency. Had two representatives as well. We looked at the various arms or the tentacles of this problem, particularly the export end. We discussed collaboration with foreign countries, and we have agreed to establish a task force to ensure greater collaboration at all ends, because GRA says it's in the dark with some information, SOCU is in the dark, and of course the Gold Board and GGMC. So that meeting was in fact held this morning and finished at about 11. And we meet again in 2 weeks, where we will continue to refine our action plan. And we will make some information available, but please not all, because this is a sensitive matter and it involves billions of dollars, not just Guyana dollars, but US dollars. The export of our gold is as far as the Middle East. It goes to China, it goes to parts of Europe, and there are big interests here and abroad that have their hands on the export. Not all of it is illegitimate. We do want to facilitate the legitimate export of gold. One of the matters that came up this morning, of course, is the infamous case of the gold that was stolen in Curacao. So we're trying to track that down and get a better handle on it. But I think we can safely say that we had our first interagency meeting this morning, and it was agreed that we would collaborate, work together, and share with each other, and of course with our counterparts, international counterparts abroad. So it's an ongoing assignment.
Specifically, have you made contact with your counterparts in Brazil and Suriname?
Well, not as yet, but agencies have been in touch, but I have not formally spoken to Brazilian and Surinamese counterparts, because we're trying to, as I said, to get a handle on the various tentacles of the problem before we venture out. Because if you venture out with insufficient information, you can be embarrassed by not asking the right questions, and we want to know what it is exactly we are dealing with before we go elsewhere.
Mr. Trotman, a quick follow-up to the question. On the topic of the Curacao gold, have you seen that report prepared by persons and handed to the last president?
I am not yet in receipt of that report.
Do you know where that report is? Or have you made a request for it?
Yes, there's been an exchange of correspondence recently over the last 10 or so days, so we're getting the report, and I'm quite impressed with the work of the Special Organized Crime Unit. I'd like to sing its praises, and I believe with the efforts of that unit, efforts of the Minister of State and his office and others, we will get to the bottom of this matter.
How soon do you think you'll...
We'll meet again on the 6th of October.
No, I'm talking specifically about the report.
Well, as you know, that report has been missing for 2 years. So to ask me to get it in a few hours is asking a bit too much. I'd like to be able to get it in a few hours, but it may take me some weeks, because there seems to be an effort to keep it buried. So we have to go first and find it, and then unearth it as best as we can.
Are you confident that you will?
Well, we'll get as much as we can. We may not get all the facts. Thanks.
Could you say, sir, who holds the copyright for the textbooks that are being printed? And does government envisage an increase in the number of troops, the strength to pre-1990 levels as we had back in the 80s, in light of these increased forms of aggression in our borders?
Two things. Let me answer the last first. That any decision on the increase of troop strength will be made after a careful assessment of the threat is done. I can give you this assurance that national security is a matter which engages the attention of this administration every day. On a weekly basis, a National Security Committee meets. I think the President indicated that to you yesterday in his engagement with the press. And at least on a fortnightly basis, the other security elements within the state also meet. At the level of the Defense Board, which is a statutory body, the Defense Board meets once a month. And so at various levels, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a fortnightly basis, and on a monthly basis, there is continuous assessment and evaluation of the threat to Guyana, not just from one country, but from all our borders, including the sea, and disasters as the case might be. So that these are all matters which engage us and on the periods of time as I indicated. The copyright for the books will remain with the Ministry of Education, and that's where it resides. Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on the gold smuggling issue. The President spoke about this on, I believe, the public interest, where he said that perhaps the reform of the tax regime might possibly stimulate more gold declaration. Do you believe that this is effective? And if you do, are you making moves towards this end?
If my president says, may possibly, I'm not going to move and say that I believe. But I think what the president is signaling is that we have a review of our tax laws, the royalties paid. For example, one complaint has been that because royalties are lower in Suriname, that people, they prefer to take gold to Suriname where they get a higher price. And so we're looking at that. I know that Suriname has made some adjustments recently, so it's not as attractive as before. But I think the President rightly has signaled that there has to be a review of all the different points where gold makes an impact, from production to declaration and then export. So it is a bit premature for me to say, but by having the presence of the GRA in the task force, we can better determine where, if at all, GRA's role has to be enhanced, and if laws have to be changed, yes, so be it.